Welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving deep into the topic of freelance contractors versus employees in California, focusing on how the law shapes our workplace injury protocols. Um, you know,
Yeah, definitely. So we're looking at the legal classification and all of that intricate stuff, right?
right, exactly. At the heart of it all is California's AB5 law, and its amendments that force a lot of workers um, who were once seen as independent contractors to be classified as employees unless they pass the so called ABC test.
And that ABC test is the crux, isn't it? Like, what does each letter stand for?
Yes, it really is. So the A part states that the worker must be free from the control and direction of the hiring entity while performing their work. Pretty fundamental,
Yeah.
right?
Sure, real basic control issues there. And then what about B?
For B, the worker has to perform tasks that are outside the usual course of the hiring entity's typical business operations. So if you're a
Uh
specialized
huh.
designer working outside the company's core activities, you might check that off.
I see. That's interesting. And the C is about having an independent business, isn't it?
Exactly. C requires that the worker is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business. So, like if you got your own business set up, you're more likely to meet that criterion.
Okay, got it. So if a freelance contractor doesn't tick all those boxes, they get classified as an employee. That's a pretty big deal when it comes to safety protocols and workers' comp, right?
Precisely. And that brings us to our next major point, the workers' compensation coverage.
Let me guess. If you're classed correctly as an independent contractor, you're generally not covered by the company's workers' comp insurance.
Spot on. If the contractor is properly classified as independent, typically the hiring company doesn't cover them with workers' comp insurance. Still, the
Right?
company has a duty of care under general liability law.
So even if they're independent, the safety net can't just be ignored completely.
Exactly. Regardless of classification, California mandates that employers ensure a safe workplace under Cal OSHA requirements. It's a non negotiable part. Even if someone is an independent contractor, serious injuries must be reported within 8 hours.
Yeah, that rapid reporting seems super important for safety.
Absolutely. And it's not just about reporting. Employers also need to actively ensure that their work sites are safe.
Yeah,
So the legal obligation here stretches far beyond just a label.
that's an interesting point. But what about, specific agreements with freelance contractors? Do those add another layer to the picture?
Yes, indeed. Many companies, out of an abundance of caution, include clauses in contractor agreements that detail additional safety measures or even voluntary injury coverage. These contractual terms can provide extra clarity on safety and liability issues.
Mm-hmm. So the agreements can often like walk the extra mile to protect both parties?
Exactly. It's all about defining safety responsibilities clearly. And they also recommend that injuries to freelance contractors are treated with the same urgency and documentation as those sustained by
Right.
employees. That way, if an injury occurs, there's a consistent, proactive response.
Wait a minute, though. If a contractor is injured due to the company's negligence or an unsafe environment, wouldn't that still leave the company liable even if the contractor is independent?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Even with proper classification, if an injury happens because of the company's own shortcomings in providing a safe environment, the company could indeed face liability
Mm-hmm.
issues. So it's not a free pass for the company on safety responsibilities.
That makes sense. It sounds like the classifications affect insurance and compensation, but they don't completely absolve the employer's duty to provide a safe workplace.
Exactly, that's a critical aspect. The key here is that while the classification impacts workers' comp coverage, it doesn't dilute the employer's obligation under general liability and OSHA regulations.
I can see that. But don't you find it a bit contradictory that a contractor might be treated differently on paper, but safety wise, they're essentially on the same playing field as employees?
Yes, there's definitely a tension there. On paper, you're right, the coverage requirements differ. However, the baseline safety requirements remain the same for all workers on the site. They all deserve the same level of protection, whether they're considered contractors or employees.
So, in a way, it's a bit like having different warranties on products that are, at the end of the day, expected to perform safely. You know?
That's a neat analogy. It's like different warranty labels, but underlying. The product should be safe for use. In our context, the company must keep the working environment safe no matter what the contract classification says.
All right, now moving on to practical tips. It seems companies are advised to treat injuries with urgency and document everything thoroughly, right?
Absolutely, and that's one of the practical recommendations. Documenting injuries, performing thorough investigations, and having clear safety protocols can be the difference between a well-managed incident and a legal fiasco.
Yeah,
And these clear protocols should be outlined in contractor agreements as well.
right, because without clear guidelines, there's just so much room for dispute over who is responsible for what.
Exactly. By setting these clear expectations and safety accountability measures in contractor agreements, companies not only protect themselves, but also provide transparency and a clear path for redress if something goes wrong.
And that also builds trust on the ground, doesn't it? Workers know exactly what's expected and what protections they have.
Precisely. This system encourages proactive, thorough safety practices, ensuring that regardless of the classification, every worker's well-being is prioritized.
Right on.
And that definitely aligns with both legal obligations and ethical business practices.
Now, here's a thought. Some might argue that clearly defining every safety aspect in contracts adds an administrative burden. What's your take on that?
That's a fair point. Sure, it may add a layer of bureaucracy, but in the long run, it's a lot less costly than dealing with litigation or worker injuries that could have been prevented.
Absolutely.
So the upfront effort is really well worth it.
That makes sense overall. Proactive planning can avert lots of future headaches.
Exactly. It's about staying ahead of potential issues by embedding safety into every contractual and operational detail. A bit like maintaining your car regularly to avoid a breakdown.
That's a solid analogy. Prevention is always better than cure.
Definitely. And overall, while the legal framework may seem rigid at times, it's really designed to ensure that all workers, regardless of classification, have a protected, safe work environment.
And in a fast-paced work culture, that assurance is incredibly valuable.
Right. It ultimately serves as a reminder that safety is everyone's responsibility, and clear legal definitions only help in clarifying those duties rather than undermining them.
Well said. It's been really insightful breaking down these classifications and the associated safety protocols.
Absolutely. Hopefully, our conversation sheds some light on why precise definitions and proactive measures are essential in today's work environment. Thanks for the engaging discussion.